We've definitely done a few episodes focusing on specific directors before, but I figured it was time on Dead Last to cover one of the wilder ones out there and talk about Terry Gilliam. Now, Terry's been in the game for a while now, and I figured it was time to dive into his works and discuss which of them shine and which did not. And this encompasses his entire career, but it's just the feature film works, and there's 13 of them in total. And this is the roster, and it's a very eclectic batch of stuff, dipping into a number of genres from sci-fi to fantasy to drama to I don't know what the heck to call most of these movies. As usual, I posted that roster for my patrons and asked them to rank them with their favorite film in first place and second favorite in second place and so on, down to their 13th favorite one in dead last. This month, 28 people answered the call, including myself, and that means that if everyone voted the same film as number one, the best possible score would be 28 points. And the worst possible score, if everyone voted the same film in dead last, would be 364. So, now, let's hop in. And we've never really had a dead last like this before, so I guess now for something completely different. Coming in at dead last, we had a somewhat close race for this for a while, but in the end, one film stood out with 304 points, and we're looking at Tideland. 5 people put this in their dead last spot, and that's 18% of the lists, and the best score that it got was 6th place, where it got put twice. And I didn't have this in my dead last, but almost, since it was my 12th place pick. And this is a hard one to judge because it's such a hard film to watch. Like, it feels like one of Gilliam's films in some ways, but so drastically different than others. It has that same element of imagination and fantasy, but interpreted in such a different way. It's like seeing only the reality elements of the earlier films and not really getting to see the fantastical worlds that our main characters see. It's also an incredibly dark film and dealing with incredibly dark stuff. But in terms of putting it down low, I think the toughest thing is that it's just too long. Like, the story doesn't sustain the 2 hours of runtime, and it feels a lot longer. Like, I get what he's going for here in creating the extremely depressing reality and just seeing it through a child's eyes and perspective, but it doesn't make for an entertaining watch. So what you get is a film that's dealing with subject matter that's not something fun to watch, but it's presenting it to you in a way that's also not fun to watch. So it just ends up an unpleasant experience all around. Gilliam himself said that he figured a lot of people wouldn't like it and wouldn't know what to think, and I guess I'm one of those. But I don't think it's terrible. Like, seeing that he made this one so close to the Brothers Grimm, a film that plays everything so safe and commercial, I feel like it's possible that this one was a kind of apology, but he took things in the opposite direction of being as unsafe as he could, and maybe course corrected a bit too hard.
Take care of each other, how's that? And I'll make sure you get where you're going.
It's time to check out our number 12 movie, and this one was dead last for a while, and I thought for sure it was going to take that spot, but in the last couple of lists, switched things. So our number 12 movie, with 300 points, only 4 points lower than Tideland, is The Zero Theorem. Now, this one was put into dead last 6 times, one more than Tideland, and 21% of the lists. But it got a little higher in terms of best score and got a 5th place ranking. And just like with Tideland, I have this one space higher than it landed, since this was my 11th place pick. And before I go any further, I should just specify that I don't actively dislike any of these films. I think every one of them has some merit, and this one's no different, even if it doesn't totally work. Like, I guess that this might be seen as part of a trilogy, much like the Imagination trilogy that I'll talk about later, but Gilliam's gone back and forth about this being part of an Orwellian triptych, along with Brazil and 12 Monkeys, which is funny because Brazil is also part of the Imagination trilogy. And it feels a whole lot like Brazil in the sense that I feel like they could take place in the same universe. And this is just a different film set at some other portion of that world. It's a smaller scale film than usual and has more of the tone of Tideland than some of his other films, in that it's mostly focused on one person and their emotional journey, although that journey is primarily limited to his own residence. But the big problem is that Q isn't the most likable character around, and most of Gilliam's films are about a charming sort of outsider, but even though he's played really well by Christoph Waltz, it's written to be someone who you're not securely on the side of, so it makes the journey a little more unpleasant. Plus, I feel like it maybe goes over a little much of the same territory that Brazil did, but in a toned down way, and it doesn't quite make me think about it long afterwards like that one did.
Bob's a genius, WizKid superbrain, and if you don't know that, shut up and listen. Yo, you cannot, will not help you, Q. We do want to help you in it too, but we won't help you get your call. We will not help you, not at all.
Here's our number 11 movie, and this one wasn't quite as close since it dropped down 29 points, down to 271. And here's what we'll find: The Brothers Grimm. And check this out, this had 7 dead last votes, which was 25% of the time. And as we're going further down on this list, the dead last votes are increasing, which is unusual. But this one did better on the top end and managed to get a 3rd place vote. And one of those 7 dead last votes was me. And like I said before, I don't hate any of these movies, and that includes this one. Like, it's fine. And I like that Jonathan Pryce is one of the few non-Python actors to show up in more than 1 or 2 of Gilliam's flicks. And his role here isn't that far removed from the one that he plays in Baron Munchausen. But there's 2 things that work against this one. First is the overall look of the thing. Like, maybe it's silly, but the earlier films had this analog look to them and everything lacked polish. It was like something a child would make. But here, they clearly had a budget to make things look professional. But I don't really want professional. I want what Gilliam is known for. This was an opportunity to embrace that this was about the writers of children's stories and make it look like a children's story. Instead, it just has that same washed out mid-2000s look with overly glossy CGI that everything else from this era had. Plus, I love this setup with them being the fake ghost hunters, but then really quickly it just becomes a standard guys versus real monsters story, and I feel like I've seen this all before. And maybe if it had the quirky tone of some of the earlier works, that could go in its favor, but instead it just feels so forgettable. And the weirdest aspect is that it doesn't feel like a Terry Gilliam film, and it feels like someone doing their best imitation of a Tim Burton film from around this same time period. It's like someone saw Sleepy Hollow and said, I can do that, as opposed to feeling like Gilliam's own thing. It does have a handful of strong bits though, like the Spider Horse, so it's not a complete loss. And in terms of films I've picked for dead last, it's likely one of the easiest to get through. Let's get into the top 10 now, and this was a similar drop down in terms of points since we're going to 249 now, 22 down, and it's time to visit the Imaginarium of Dr. Parnassus. Big drop in number of dead lasts given since this only got 2, but just like Brothers Grimm, the highest ranking that it got was 1 3rd place pick. And I'm back on my trend of my pick being just 1 above where it landed since I put this one in my 9th place spot. And this film is more interesting than it is good, because it's a film that was greatly upended by the death of one of its stars. Famously, Heath Ledger passed away during production, but unlike something like The Crow, which was mostly done, they were only 1/3 of the way into the procedures. And it was interesting how they were able to complete it. They used other actors to stand in for him when he's in the Imaginarium, and then did some close-up bits with another actor wearing a mask. The problem with that is that it makes those scenes feel really disjointed, because not only do you have to adjust to being in this situation that's outside of the reality of the film world, but now you also have to have a different actor as this character, so it doesn't really feel lined up, especially when it comes to the ending, since there's elements of characters that are then revealed and they're not who they seem to be. But the problem is that when they have a different face than before, it's hard to connect to the two characters, so the finale just doesn't have the same punch it could have. But those are things that I could probably see past. But I feel like they bit off a bit more than they could chew here, because the special effects in the Imaginarium are extremely dated and look terrible. And what I said about Brothers Grimm applies here as well, in that I would have preferred to see a more handmade take on things. But instead, it just looks like a cutscene from PlayStation 2. It's time for our single-digit entries as we go down to number 9. And this was a super close call, since it came down to a single point. And this one landed at 248, sneaking past Dr. Parnassus. And it's time for The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. Just like that film, this also got 2 dead last votes, but it did get 1 first place vote, our first film on the list to do so. And look at that, I'm still 1 ahead, since this one I have in 8th place. And this is the movie that Gilliam was trying to make for almost 30 years. He read the book that it's based on in 1989 and started working on a version of it, but it just never clicked. I remember reading about him working on it ages ago in film magazines, and then just never getting the money to do it the way he wanted to do it. And they even started doing a take on it in 2000 and were plagued with sound issues, and then a flash flood that destroyed footage and equipment, and then had their lead actor injured and they had to recast. But then that process took too long and the studio canceled the production. But he kept trying, and they ended up making a documentary about the failure to get the film made called Lost in La Mancha. So I think it's safe to call this film an extreme labor of love for Gilliam. And it's weird, because after seeing this movie, after all these years, I feel like he's already made it. This feels like an extension of The Fisher King. What with the jerky straight man who is in the entertainment industry, and the comedic character who has delusions of grandeur and an imagined quest. My biggest issue with it, though, is that Toby, as a main character, is just not likable at all. Like, Adam Driver is playing him well, but he's just not likable at all, and he comes off as a grating asshole. I compared him with Fisher King's Jeff Bridges character, and that guy was written with more of a downfall and a certain amount of humility, and in the 80s that kind of character had a bit more leeway. But now, he just comes off as a spoiled man-baby. But Jonathan Pryce keeps this afloat, and he's giving a bit of the Baron Munchausen vibes with his part, and he's charming, but he's also no Robin Williams. And the biggest shame of it all is that this is his passion project, and yet the documentary about him not being able to make it was far more interesting than the finished product ended up being. Let's go to number 8 now, and this was still a little bit close, but not like 1 point close, since it was an 8-point drop down to 240, and here's where we'll find Jabberwocky. This was only given the dead last spot a single time, only once, and the best score that it got was 1 third place vote. And here's one that I had a bit lower than everyone else, since this one was in 10th place for me, and it's interesting that the entire bottom portion of this list so far has been the more recent entries, and this is the first film on here that was from his earlier stuff. This is only his second feature film, and it's a weird one because you can see that Gilliam hasn't quite figured out his own thing yet. The only film he directed before this was Holy Grail, and it's going away from that scattershot, sketchy feel of that and leaning more towards the narrative structure he'd later have. But there's still a touch of the episodic nature to it. I mean, This is a guy whose roots are in sketch comedy and a sketch show, and Grail was, in a way, a collection of skits, and this kind of has that going on, although a refined version of it. But it also weirdly feels like an extension of Holy Grail, since a lot of the settings and costuming is similar. Like, part of it feels like they had extra time with all of their rentals for that picture and just decided to take advantage of it and shoot some other stuff and form a movie out of it. But that's not the case. But then, I think the biggest issue is that it's presenting itself as a comedy, and everyone seems to be treating it as such, particularly Palin in the lead, but it's really not that funny. Maybe because this is coming off of the high of the humor of the previous film, but the jokes just aren't as plentiful here, to the point that it feels like it's going for more of a dramatic tint, but then just not committing to it. And it lacks any of the emotional punch of later stuff, so it feels like it's just sitting in the middle of comedy and drama, afraid to stray too far into either side. As we go to our number 7 movie, I'll note that this is our dead center movie on this list. There's 6 above it and 6 below it, so it's smack dab in the middle of things, and with 190 points, a big drop of 50 points from Jabberwocky. Get ready for some fear and loathing in Las Vegas. It did get a pair of votes for dead last, but it also got 1 first place ranking. Well, this is one that I have right where it landed, since this was my 7th place pick as well, and I have to be honest, when I heard that this was going to be a project for Gilliam, I thought it was a poor batch. Based on things like Baron Munchausen and even Fisher King, doing a drug-addled memoir felt like an odd fit for him. But I have no idea what I was thinking, because the idea of a man breaking the barriers of fantasy and reality it's custom made for him, even if here it's assisted by a little bit of extra materials. And it's funny, because I was previously familiar with Bill Murray's take on doing Hunter S. Thompson, and I was never thrilled with his interpretation of it, since it mostly just felt like Murray being Murray with a slightly different accent. But I've also seen interviews with the real guy, and I have to admit, and I think that this is an opinion that I'm in the minority on, I think Depp goes too far into the realm of caricature with it. Whereas you had Bill Murray playing it a little too safe, I think Depp doesn't play it safe at all, and to me it feels like a performance as opposed to a real person. It just comes off as someone acting crazy and drug-addled to me, instead of the real thing. I almost wish that there was a way to split the difference between Murray and Depp and have something that felt like a real character instead. I mean, I guess his over-the-top nature fits the garish craziness of the narrative, but even in the quieter moments, it just felt like too much for me, and I couldn't get into it. But I also think that it's a solid film, and I do enjoy watching it, and it's certainly funny with some quotable material, and the speech about the wave breaking hit the right chords and hit home that satiric drive for the film.
Less than 5 years later, you can go up on a steep hill in Las Vegas and look west. And with the right kind of eyes, you can almost see the high water mark. That place where the wave finally broke.
We're now on the top half of the roster, and at number 6, we're swinging down another 29 points, which is another decent drop, and we're at 161 now with The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. This is the first film on the list to not get any dead last votes, and spoiler alert, it's one of only 3 films here to do so. But it did get 2 12th place nods. But it's also the first film to get more than 1 first place vote, as it received 2. And here's the thing, I put this slightly above again, and I had this in 5th, and you have no idea how hard that was for me, considering just how much I adore this film. And this is the third part of that Imagination trilogy I mentioned earlier, which is Time Bandits, Brazil, and then this. And not surprisingly, they're some of my favorites of his films. It's said that Time Bandits is the world seen through the eyes of a child, Brazil of an adult man, and this film is through the eyes of a senior man. And it's similar to Time Bandits in that it's a series of vignettes and set pieces that we're going through with the concepts of imagination and wonder, and there's just so many different themes happening here. And it's funny because I think one of the biggest complaints of this one at the time was that it was kind of a children's movie, but the events are so patently adult that it feels a bit confusing as to who it's aimed towards. But the answer is me. It's aimed directly at me because I love it and will watch it at any time at all. It seems like the filming was really tough, and little Sarah Polly, now grown of course, has said that it was really grueling and far more than a child could handle. Eric Idle said the same and said that he had avoided being in Gilliam's movies before this because he knew they were difficult experiences. Meanwhile, Robin Williams is credited as Ray D. Tuto in the film, the king of everything, and that's because he was cast at the last minute and the money had run out and he agreed to do it unpaid, but his agents insisted that he not be credited so they couldn't use him for the marketing, but they put him in the trailers anyway.
Grasp the mantle! Grasp the... No, quite wrong! Open the gate!
Our number 5 film had another significant drop down since it goes to 146, which is a drop of 15 points. Not as big as the earlier drops, but still decent, and it's The Fisher King. One person did put this one in dead last, which I kind of found shocking, and it was also put into first place twice. And I put this higher since this was my 3rd place pick, and again, it was hard to put this anywhere other than number 1 because I think this is a powerhouse of a film. But there's 2 that I like even more, and that's saying something. But does the idea of a shock jock even play anymore? Like the funny thing is that this movie is like, oh, hey, look at how damaging this sort of messaging can be. And it's like, can we go back to that stuff instead of this weird manosphere misinformation podcast world that we're in today? This is also a world in which a mass shooting at a bar would be a big deal, and one where the person who inspired that shooting would be held accountable instead of getting a raise and getting booked on promotional tours. I'll take someone like 80s Howard Stern over this current batch of psychopaths with a microphone jammed in their supplement-selling faces any day. But it's an insanely human story, and one in which every performance is amazing. I mean, of course Robin Williams is stellar, walking that fine line between comedy and tragedy, and Jeff Bridges has that really difficult job of playing a prick, but one that you're rooting for anyway. But then Mercedes Ruehl strolls in and steals the entire show and got an Oscar for it, and it was insanely deserved. She's throwing so much nuance in every single line of dialogue she's speaking, and I feel like people don't talk about it enough. But then you also have Amanda Plummer just being awkward and delightful and sort of goofy, but also making it very clear how Perry just fell right in love with her. And of course, Michael Jeter, a man who didn't get nearly enough accolades when he was alive. And yeah, everyone's great in this. But it's also giving you that fantasy world that Gilliam was so known for at this point, but perfectly balancing it with that real-life drama for an absolute standout film, with at least 3 moments that are guaranteed to make the softies, like me, wipe away some tears.
What? What'd you come here for? Did you come to get the rest of your stuff? There's no more stuff, Jack. It all got burned. Accidentally.
This is getting really, really hard now because there's only amazing films left, and how do you even pick here? But our number 4 film had 120 points, a drop of 26. And pack your bags, because we're going to Brazil. A movie that I kind of thought would be number 1, but it did get one person to rank it in dead last, but it was put into first place 5 times, which was 18% of the lists. And I had this higher since this was my 2nd place pick, and everything I said about Fisher King applies here. I thought this could be number 1, and I thought that it could possibly be my number 1, but there's one film I like a touch better. But this is a movie that's not playing around in any single facet of itself. For a movie that's as dark and depressing as it is, and all about this dystopian, oppressive future where hope is in short supply, it's also weirdly, hauntingly beautiful. but I guess it's meant as a pseudo-sequel to 1984, and it fits in well with that in terms of tone and themes. And I'm always intrigued by it because it definitely plays with the concept of fantasy versus reality and how much of what our main character is experiencing is real. And an interesting thing is that I change my opinion with nearly every viewing about when the fantasy world starts. I don't want to give things away, but there's definitely a moment where things that we're seeing aren't really happening, and honestly, I'm not entirely convinced of when that moment is. And here's what I want to talk about. This movie cost $15 million to make, and it came out in 1985. Other movies that came out that year were Back to the Future, Rambo 2, Rocky 4, Cocoon, The Goonies, and Brazil was done for cheaper than every single one of those. Every one of them. And it looks so elaborate and gorgeous with its crazy sets and fantastical dream creatures, and every time I watch it, I get sad about this sort of handmade filmmaking, the idea that what you're seeing can't exist, but it does because someone made it as opposed to it being a computer-generated thing. And yeah, I love this movie a whole lot. It's top 3 time, and this was kind of close since it was a battle of only 2 points, and I think that the last list or two may have bumped this up to number 3 as opposed to number 4, and with 118 points, it's Time Bandits. So this is our second of 3 films that didn't get any dead last votes, and the worst score that it got was 10th place. Also, it took first place 6 times, which is 21% of the time, and 1 more than Brazil. And this was my number 1, and I wasn't sure if it would be going into this, but it quickly became clear that nothing else could be in this spot for me. I can't explain just how much I love this movie. It's crazy. This silly, elaborate romp about a quest through time and dimensions, complete with slapstick and monsters and stuff, but then it's also this weird rumination on existentialism and the cruel machinations of the universe that'll leave you feeling like a tiny, insignificant dot in a vast expanse of being. One thing that's wild to me is that it's such a big cast. There's so many characters and situations that arise, and yet they're all so distinct and memorable. Of course, a number of Monty Python members pop in, like John Cleese in a really fun bit, and a recurring role from Michael Palin. But then you have Ian Holm in there, Shelley Duvall, Jim Broadbent's there, and of course, Sean Connery. Plus, no movie from this era was putting little people front and center and making them the main characters of the film. And sure, the fact that they're little is played for laughs, but they're also given meaty roles to play and levels of heroism that no one else was doing. And David Rappaport as Randall just steals the show and gives a fantastic performance, even if he butted heads with the other little people actors on set. One thing to point out as well is that this still has a bit of the skit structure to it, and that it's a series of connected vignettes and set pieces, although the core story that they're built around is stronger. So even though they're jumping from place to place, it feels more like it's serving the greater story. And, man, you didn't think I was gonna not talk about David Warner, did you? Because his version of Evil Genius is such a great villain, with some of the best lines in the film, and a threat so intense that it takes a literal Deus Ex Machina to defeat him. And then there's that ending. Not that I want to give it away, but there's nothing else like it.
And you're a robber too, are you? How long have you been a robber?
4'1".
Good Lord. Jolly good. 4'1".
Yes.
Well, that is a long time, isn't it?
There's only 2 films left, and this was as tight a race as it could be because this next film was number 1 for almost the entire window that I was taking rankings, but one other film just kept catching up to it slowly, and at the final moment, 2 final rankings allowed that other film to sneak up by 2 points, and now this one, now in second place with 101 points, is Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Well, it did get put into dead last 1 time, but it was also put into first place 9 times, 32% of the lists, and the film with the largest amount of number 1s. This was also a tough call because I had to put this down in number 6. But don't let that make you think I don't love this goofy film. And I mean, what can you even say about this movie? It's one of the best and most notorious comedy films of all time. But here's the thing. This was the first Monty Python movie, and this is a group of guys known for sketch comedy and a show that's a bunch of randomness thrown together. So the challenge here was taking that concept but also framing it around a feature narrative. It feels so much like a string of disconnected skits, so it's just segment after segment, but it still works within the framework, however loose that may be. It doesn't hurt that it's also incredibly hilarious and so full of quotable bits that I'm actually sick of people quoting it. Like, I may want to have it slightly lower on my roster just because of how sick I am of people that I generally wouldn't care for rattling off lines from it. But I won't have it down on my roster for that, but I will mark it down a bit because it all feels a bit random. Its main goal is telling jokes, and yes, it's very, very good at that, but there's so many movies on this list that are working on multiple level and have deeper meaning and subtext that this one just feels like a little lightweight, which is a great thing for a comedy sometimes, since this is clearly a film that you pop on at any time and watch any amount of it really, and it's a good time. But with this list, I was just looking for more.
What is your name?
Sir Galahad of Camelot.
What is your quest?
I seek the Grail.
What is your favorite color?
Blue. No.
And that just leaves one film for our number one spot. And like I said, it fought a long, hard road to get to this spot, but managed to claw its way up to the top with 99 points and with 12 monkeys. And it's our third and final film that didn't get any dead last rankings. And in fact, the lowest score that it got was 8th place, and only one time. But here's the wild part. It was only put into first place twice, and that's less than the number 2, 3, and 4 films, but it just had consistently high scores all around. And again, some tough decisions to be made, and I gave this one 4th place on my list. And I'll be honest, when I started this list, I wouldn't have guessed that I would have this that high, because I assumed that I'd be into some of the weirder ones more. But nah, I mean, this movie's great. And this is a film that really benefits from rewatches. The beginning and the bit with the "we did it" sign, and then the shot of the lion is just like a great bit of subtle foreshadowing. And you see it the first time around and you're like, that's weird. But then you watch it again and it all becomes clear. And look, I'm partial to time travel stories, as they're one of my favorite sci-fi concepts, and I have a particular fascination with any of them that deal with a linear timeline. I love the concept that if time travel were possible, there's only one set timeline and you can't change it, so anything in the past would only ever happen first, and if you try to go back in time to change things, you'll only ever end up being a part of the events as they initially happened. And this movie's possibly one of the best examples of a linear timeline in cinema. It helps that I had previously seen the film that it was based on, the French flick La Jetée, and even if that took away some of the impact because the twist is the same, it didn't make it any less well done. But I guess if there's one thing that makes me less overwhelmed by all of this is the presence of Bruce Willis, who I never really thought was that strong of an actor, although I think he does a good job here. I just think that a better actor could have really elevated this one even more. But I get why it's number one. It's probably Gilliam's most mainstream flick that's great, as opposed to the Brothers Grimm, which trades away all of his quirks. And it still feels like one of his here, and it's fantastic. So there you have it, 13 films by Terry Gilliam, all ranked up. Let's take a look at this roster and see how it is. I honestly, there's not many changes to this that I would be upset by. This seems to be pretty solid, even though it doesn't match mine. It's fairly close to mine. There's not a lot of movies on here that would be ranked up high that I would be like offended by. Maybe Brothers Grimm. I just think that film's kind of bland, but it's still a decent film. But I just don't really know if I would have had this any differently. Although let me know what you would have voted on differently if you would have been in this ranking, which you could have been if you had gone to patreon.com/movietimelines and become a member there for as little as $1 a month, where we do a different list every single month. This month it was Terry Gilliam. Next month, who knows? I know the patrons are working on 2 different lists now because we usually project it out 2 months in advance to give people lots of time to watch the movies. But yeah, go on over there and become a member and become a part of the group that we do this with. It's a lot of fun. So go there. Also, just let me know down below what you would have rated these, which is your favorite, which is one would you have at dead last. Tell me that. Also, if you like the video, hit that like button. If you enjoy the channel, subscribe to it and hit the bell to get notified when videos go live. And check out that Patreon page and then keep on coming back here and watching videos because there's going to be another great one coming your way very, very soon. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.